All right. Good afternoon, guys. I'm going to be reviewing my options trades today. Ever since I got back from the other side of the world, my sleep schedule has actually been pretty bad. And in an attempt to fix it, I didn't sleep last night at all. A little tired going into this morning's trading. But yeah, so I'm personally getting back into the groove of things. I feel as if my trading is a little sloppy since I've been back. So I'm going to review my options trading today. Today was my first red day in a few weeks. I don't think I had a red day before I left on my trip. I think the second week leading up to that, I had a red day. But as you guys know, red days are fairly rare. And yeah, I'm going to review today's trades. Now, as far as the pre-market analysis goes, well, we did miss a big pivot here. That's the first thing. Now, some context is important with today. I felt like today was a fairly sloppy day. Reason number one, I obviously did not, like I just said, I didn't sleep last night at all. Like I just didn't go to bed at all. Reason number two, I lost track of the time while I was awake, and I checked the time randomly, and it was 6:29. As many of you guys know, during this time of year, the market opens at 6:30 for me. So I rushed to my computer and I turned on my monitor about 30 seconds after the market opened, and then I was doing Thinkorswim for that. Or sorry, configuring my Thinkorswim after that, right? Setting up the right contracts, so on and so forth. So sloppy day to start right away. I didn't get a chance to do pre-market analysis, but if I did, looking at it now, we are chopping downwards, which is typically bullish, right? There's a decent trend line here, which I'd be bullish for an upside break of. It's not a crazy trend line though, but you can kind of bend it a little bit, and there it is. Bullish for a break to the upside of this trend line. However, we did barely miss this pivot right here. Now, it's not anywhere close to a perfect double bottom, but this is a major pivot down here. So if we get into this demand, I would be bearish for this demand to break. I didn't get a chance to do this analysis this morning. So I'm going to look at the trades that I did take and then look at without the pre-market analysis and analyze if I should have done anything different now that I've done this analysis, because I didn't even see this this morning, at least at this time of day. Well, the market opens with the world's biggest candle. That I do remember. And I was bearish for this demand to break. But by the end of this candle, I barely got my puts ready, and it's too close to the price target now. I'm very bearish for it to get here, but I'm not able to enter. I did not expect the world's biggest red candle at market open. So I didn't pull the trigger on puts. It looked like NQ was weaker than ES, but ES was in a million demand zones, and I didn't want to just hop into SPX puts. And then here's pretty interesting. ES flipped weaker than NQ. Now, this is a potential area to get into SPX puts, because now I know it's ES that's actually weaker than NQ, and I'm bearish for NQ to break demand. The problem is, though, I found it a little bit too risky because ES was in so many demand zones. Now, I told you guys in live that I was going to try to be a little bit more cautious with my trades, and that's only been lasting for like one trade. We kind of went over it a little bit yesterday. The second trade of yesterday was a green day, a decent green day, but the second trade was a red trade, and that was an avoidable trade. A little bit too aggressive with the trading first day back. Same thing happened today. So I went into today planning on being what's the word I'm looking for? Not necessarily more cautious, but more picky with my trades, right? Focusing on win rate just a little bit more than I usually do. I usually don't care about win rate. If I'm making money, I'm making money. But leading up to my trip, because of the massive amount of distractions I've had going on in my life. And then yesterday, just coming back from my trip, my win rate started getting a little bit less than average. Still making money, but not as much, which indicates some sloppiness happening. So going into today, that was kind of the plan. And that did not last. Maybe it's because of a lack of sleep, maybe a lack of discipline, maybe a little bit of both. But it's important that, as a trader, you go back every day and analyze these things. And if you don't go back every day and analyze these things, your learning curve is going to be a lot longer and a lot more painful. So this was a potential put opportunity. Now, I do agree with my decision to not enter. It's just, there's a million demand zones. And then this was fairly confusing. Now NQ's weak again, maybe? I mean, it got a red candle. ES just got a green candle, so I don't know if they're inverted or what's going on. But at this point, I'm bearish for it to get here. There's not much I can do, though. It's too close to the price target, and it does get there on the very next candle. Looking back on it, I don't think I'd do anything different. I think this was the correct decision to be made. And, yeah, I believe it was the correct decision to be made. Anyways, ES has now swept two of my pivots and is bouncing out of a double demand zone. Here's the other pivot. It is a very major pivot. This is a bullish liquidity sweep with a volume spike on ES. And it looks like it's stronger than NQ. You can see that they both got a fairly large red candle here, 2 candles back. But the last candle, ES got a significantly smaller red candle. NQ was a lot weaker. So it's clear to me that ES is stronger than NQ at the moment. I don't believe I had any pivots here on NQ, but that is a beautiful bullish liquidity sweep on ES and demand bounce. We get a selling wick here. Now ES starts looking a little bit weaker again, but not much. Very similar again. Then we start moving up. Now it looks like ES is a little bit stronger. And then I get this candle. I end up filling calls on this candle. Now, ES looked stronger to me. ES has fully invalidated this high. NQ is not. NQ is currently at this percentage of this candle. ES is higher. ES looked a little bit stronger. Just a little bit. And it's the one that swept the liquidity. But they both look really close. Okay? Now, this has technically invalidated a majority of the move. And I'm leaning bullish for this pivot up here. Looking back on this trade, was a little bit of an aggressive trade. Still a correct trade to make, but a little bit aggressive. I could have waited to see how it tested supply or if it bullishly consolidated. But to me, this was a beautiful liquidity sweep after making multiple lower lows in demand. This was a perfectly warranted trade. But right after I entered this trade at 2.8, and right after I entered, oh crap, ES flipped much, much weaker than NQ. ES is a huge red candle. NQ is a tiny one. Look at the difference. Here's the nearest NQ pivot. This is the pre-market high pivot. I'm bullish for it to get here. Well, this sucks because if I entered the NASDAQ, I'd be doing a lot better than I am. Not only is this a big issue, not only is ES flipping weak, which is a big issue, but my calls are chopping to hell. Okay, now I only filled half size on this. I plan to average up or average down accordingly. I'll average down if we, it kind of just depends. If we bullishly dip with some buying wicks, I'll average down because we're in demand. Otherwise, I plan on averaging up here because even more of the move will be invalidated. It will look good. Well, these contracts are absolutely chopping, and ES is definitely weaker than NQ. Well, the problem is they're both still moving up. And here, it looks like ES was catching up to the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ has now reached its next supply zone. Now, ES started flipping weak once it reached its next supply zone, so I'm figuring, okay, they've kind of been doing this thing this morning where one's a lot stronger than the other, and the other catches up fairly quickly within 2 candles. I'm thinking ES is going to catch up. Both are relatively close to the pre-market high price target. So I add my second half of calls right here. Now remember, I entered these calls initially at 2.8. I filled my second half at 2.8. I was absolutely scammed to start the day off. The QQQ calls were up like 30%, but I didn't enter those. Uh, these freaking calls weren't only weren't just slower than a molasses in the winter. They literally didn't move at all. We are going straight up in there and not moving. And on this pullback, now I'm down 10%. Now I'm down 30%. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Well, by this candle, NQ is still somehow a lot stronger than ES. A lot stronger than ES. And I have a very difficult decision to make. Very, very difficult decision to make. Because at this point, with NQ's strength in its position on the chart, I am beyond bullish for NQ to get pre-market high, but I'm stuck in this SPX trade that I haven't stopped out of. Well, I move my stop loss up to something like this, roughly here, very close. And at this point, I need to be in QQQ calls, but I find myself unwilling to sell SPX. It was hard for me. It's always hard to sell a position that hasn't hit your stop loss, but is chopping so horrendously that you need to get out. It's hard to accept that loss when it's above where you entered, but you're down 30%. But it's even harder for me because it hasn't hit my stop loss yet. That's typically how I go, right? I enter the trade with a hypothesis. Once the hypothesis is invalidated, I exit the trade. Simple. As long as the initial hypothesis is still valid, I stay in the trade. Well, this is an issue, and I need to be in QQQ calls right now. So what I decided to do is I decided to take a little bit of risk, put on more leverage, and I enter QQQ calls. It ended up, I meant to enter just half size, ended up being a little bit greater than half size. Okay. Not here. Not here. Look at the difference in this pullback. I said the second this pullback invalidates, I'm in QQQ calls. Almost got my stop loss here. It was really close. I think my stop loss was actually like, hang on. Let me look at the screenshot. It was here. Something like this. I moved it up after this, I believe. I entered QQQ calls here half size at 84 cents. PT was this high. Here was my grand plan. I'm going to honor my stop loss on SPX. Okay. I'm going to honor my stop loss on SPX. I'm half size in QQQ. I'm willing. Both the trades are completely separate to me. I'm willing to lose money on this QQQ trade. It is so likely to hit. It is extremely strong. It's invalidated most of the move. ES has demand to support it under, at least for a small bounce. It looks okay. Here's my plan. I plan on averaging down on this QQQ trade if ES stops out and then puts in a buying wick. If it doesn't, I'll stop out of the NASDAQ here for a half size loss. I'll start today fairly red, unfortunately. But the way these contracts are moving, these contracts are dropping so much on SPX, it leaves me feeling that there may be a chance for a short squeeze just because of how much selling is happening with these contracts. The bears and sellers are being very overzealous. This is the worst chop that I've seen in before I left on my trip for 2 weeks, probably a few weeks before that. It was horrendous chop. So we'll have to see if this entire drop invalidated. I would like to average up. It just kind of depends, right? It just kind of depends. What I knew for sure is the average down scenario. The average up, I'm just going to have to feel it out. But I know my stop loss area. I know my PT on the NASDAQ. And it hit perfectly. I sold. Not here. Perfect double top. Not here. I closed everything on this candle. Everything. I got roughly 30% gains on QQQ. and I sold at 2.4, right? 2.4. Remember, I entered at 2.8 right here. I sold at 2.4 near actually the top of this candle because I sold QQQ first and then SPX for minus only like 13 or 14%. So I'm actually slightly green on the day right now. Slightly green on the day. Even though the QQQ trade was smaller than the SPX trade, it was a little bit more than half size. Smaller contract wise, the gains were a little more than twice as big. So I'm now slightly green on the day. However, I still have a feeling that, you know what? Let's see what happens. We get a bearish liquidity sweep. That could be a good put trade, but I don't really trust it. You know, ES has been so weak, and the SPX calls have been so incredibly oversold. I sold these calls here at 2.4, and they dumped to like 1.7 here, like or 1.8 or something. These calls at this point were lower or roughly at the same price. Actually, that's false. They were lower. These calls were lower right here than they were right here. Like, it was really bad. It was so bad that I started thinking the opposite. Maybe we end up getting a short squeeze. So that's what I was thinking personally. And look at this. NQ starting to be stronger, a lot stronger. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, if ES gets back up to here, I'd like to take a chance, a half-size chance on calls to the pre-market high. Just because there's so much sellers in the market right now. And if this invalidates yet another pullback, I think those sellers are going to get squeezed. That's kind of my hypothesis. And I actually thought ES was going to flip stronger than NQ on this pullback. It didn't. But on this candle, it's confirmed that NQ is stronger than ES. So now I'm looking at the NASDAQ calls, QQQ calls. And then this candle happened. Well, this candle, I honestly don't remember. So this is kind of where the sloppiness came in. I thought I waited for roughly the last 10 seconds. I didn't confirm that. But to my knowledge, I waited for the last 10 seconds and I filled calls here. Unfortunately, I got a horrendous selling wick right afterwards. Now, again, this hypothesis still stood, but as you can see, NQ invalidated, at the time of my entry, NQ invalidated all the red candles. It invalidated pretty much this entire drop, which is good. But my hypothesis was actually that if ES invalidates its entire drop, then I think it's likely to short squeeze. Now, I knew NQ was stronger on the previous candle, so I took my eyes to NQ. Now, granted, I was only half size because, you know, we're going to have to see, and I'll explain that in a second. But I took my eyes to the NASDAQ, and even with, pretend this selling wick wasn't here and it was a solid green candle, my original hypothesis was ES invalidates this entire drop, and then the short squeeze happens. So you could actually call this, you can call this scenario me jumping the gun a little bit, just a little bit. Nothing crazy. I still waited for pretty much the end of the candle. It's unfortunate that that selling wick came at the very end. Otherwise, this is not a candle I can enter. That's for sure. But I jumped the gun just a little bit, strayed slightly from my initial hypothesis, and it ended up costing me. And right after I entered, it freaking dumped. Now, I was committed. I'm averaging down. Once ES sweeps a lower low, a bullish sweep of a lower low, or I'm averaging up if ES invalidates this. Because at this point, I filled it and I'm like, oh shit. I kind of strayed from my initial hypothesis. I was supposed to wait just a tad longer. And sometimes you get lucky and unlucky, but it comes down to, if you want the law of probabilities to stay in your favor, it comes down to the tiny things, such as timing, right? Making sure you never fill your trades before the last 10-second mark of a candle. That's a big one for me, right? The tiny things. Because it's a tiny thing. You're going to get super lucky and super unlucky plenty of times. You're going to enter early randomly or accidentally enter a trade and make thousands of dollars, and you're going to accidentally enter trades or stop out of trades and lose thousands. It's going to happen. But despite the unlucky events and lucky events, overall, over the large series of total events, lucky and unlucky, it's the tiny things that will start to tip your edge either in your favor or out of your favor. And I wasn't on top of that with this trade. So I jumped the gun just a tiny bit. And that's what costed me. So after analyzing this trade, and I already did this earlier today, so I'm just talking about it. I shouldn't have entered here. But because I did, shit, now I'm going to roll with it. So, same plan as before. I'll average down if ES sweeps a lower low bullishly. But now I'll average up if ES invalidates this pullback. Or just enter SPX calls if ES ends up being stronger. Well, I was close here. But I didn't want to screw up again. This red candle hasn't fully invalidated. I want this to here. Now ES is a lot stronger than NQ now. Unfortunately, right after entered. But I wanted to enter SPX calls here because I'm still kind of thinking we can get a short squeeze, but I can't. I need this entire candle to invalidate. So I lock back into what I'm supposed to be doing. And it ended up saving me. Now NQ ends up putting in a bull flag. Again, it was very tempting to add here. Very tempting to add. But, and again, because this is a nice bull flag, but we're still in supply on a pivot, so it's kind of risky. You know, and I'm still kind of hoping this trend line can actually formally break to the upside. Still, I need us to get to here. I'm not doing anything until this happens or this happens. One of the two. And we fall. And we end up sweeping this point. Now, I end up filling my average down on this candle here. Now, it was kind of a tough decision. Do I wait? Do I fill the average down a little early here? Or do I wait for it to get to the second pivot? There's such a tiny difference. Well, we kind of got a volume spike here on NQ. We got a volume spike here on ES in demand, and we just started bouncing a little bit on the second candle. I pulled the trigger a little bit early. That's not a mistake. By the way, that's fine. And now I'm stopping out if this pivot breaks the downside. If we close under this pivot without any kind of buying wick, I'm out. Here's the candle I stopped out on. Right here. Stopped a little more than halfway down on this candle. Was looking okay for a second, but I stopped out. That ended up being a crappy loss, minus 35% on that. So at this point, I was red on the day by like 125-ish to 30-ish% trade. And again, I don't know if that trade was a red trade here was completely unavoidable. Because if I didn't enter here, entering on this bull flag was not a bad idea to me. This is a pretty nice bull flag. I think the odds are against that. If I'm trading flawlessly, I still don't think I should have entered that bull flag even here, even though it's a gorgeous bull flag and, you know, I have my sentiment and whatnot. Because we're still continuing on a pivot in very heavy supply, and ES has not invalidated this selling wick. This flag's a little bit steeper than you'd want. The proper thing to do is wait for this flag to break to the upside. So, with that being said, technically, according to my analysis, this trade was avoidable. The entry was flawed, but the rest of the trade was played perfectly. And this is technically a short entry here. I don't reverse my trades, though, so that's not something that I do. But anyways, we end up sweeping a lower low here, and That is a very bullish candle on ES. We swept the lower low. Immediately, this is starting to look like a falling wedge. That's a falling wedge in demand. A little early on, a slightly aggressive entry, but I was okay with it. You know, NQ didn't barely miss low of day or anything. It's a decent ways away. I think it bounced on the 78.6. Yeah. So I think it has room to bounce to at least the supply again. I did fill my last trade right here. And this is a fine trade. I have zero issues with this trade. And honestly, I probably would have taken it all the way to this high, even though it's forever away. Hard stop loss pretty much here. I filled at 2.9. Hypothesis is the falling wedge and validate majority of the move. Liquidity sweep in demand with the volume spike. And it looks like it's stronger than NQ at the moment. It's nearly completely invalidated these two red candles and had a pretty large buying wick. So I liked it a lot. It didn't work out though. It flipped pretty weak and I stopped out on this candle here for my final loss, minus 27%. So I was down by roughly 55 to 57% today. So two medium-sized red trades. Nothing big, nothing out of the ordinary. Now, this is technically a put entry here. If I didn't get into those calls, I enter puts here for the NASDAQ new low of day and the ES demand break. In this specific case, I probably would have entered SPX puts. Or if I had both of them up and ready to go, I would enter both, half in each. SPX and QQQ, because I don't know which one's weaker. But at this point, I'm bearish for, this demand to break. So unfortunately, only one win today and 3 losses. And my one win was half size, and all 3 of my losses were full size, which is very unfortunate. So just a straight up red day, 2 medium-sized losses on average, unfortunately. And one of those losses was avoidable, which was this one. If I did avoid it, it still would have been a red day just by one trade. But still kind of sloppy. And yesterday was slightly sloppy as well. So I'm going to get some sleep tonight, study, and try not to be sloppy anymore, hopefully. It's kind of weird getting back into things. I haven't traded or touched charts in 2 weeks because I don't trade on vacation. I always lose money. Or I'm too scared to trade on vacation again after what happened years ago. But anyways, this would have been a put trade. I'm unwilling to lose. I don't reverse my trades, right? I don't just cut calls and enter puts out of FOMO. That's an emotional trade. I don't have enough time to formulate my proper hypothesis, know exactly where I'm going to stop out, where I'm going to take profits, all those proper things to do. But it did end up getting down there. And you know what? At the end of the day, it just reinforces stop losses, right? If I didn't honor my stop loss here, we would have had a big issue. If I didn't honor my stop loss here, we would have had a big issue, right? If I didn't honor any of my stop losses, any one of those trades would cause major, major, major issues. So at the very minimum, honor your stop losses. And I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, especially because I'm very good at technical analysis. So if I screw up or I make an error, which is supposed to be rare, but the last 2 days have been a little bit hairy, it's tempting even for me to not honor my stop losses, and because I can easily break my rules and force my way out of a red day 9 days out of 10. And I've done it in the past plenty of times. But the 1 day out of 10, which is statistically guaranteed to happen, you're going to lose every single dollar you have. And all of us have experienced that. I've experienced that too many times to count. Actually, not too many times to count, but too many to remember. It's absolutely not worth it. So even when I make errors, especially trading futures, I don't want to accept some of them. But you have to remember, you will forget all about it on your next green day. And the next time you have a green day, it's going to reinforce all the decisions you made leading up to that green day. So if you get a green day or green week by bending your rules a little bit, cheating, not honoring the stop losses of your most confident trades, averaging down only when you're super confident, and you end up green on the week. Hell, if you withdraw profits, even that's going to reinforce those actions. And if those actions and mindset, if those actions you performed or the mindset you had were uh, not probabilistically favorable, right? You are statistically guaranteeing your failure. So for me, I can easily force out and not accept my errors and end up being green on the day. But now I'm statistically guaranteed to lose every dollar that I have, unless you take drastic action, with which very few people are willing to do, because I've reinforced those actions. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many errors you make, stop your trading and live to fight another day. Review it later after the market closed, like I do. Analyze your mistakes, learn from them, grow from them, and tomorrow you'll have an account to play with. If you don't do that tomorrow, you're not going to have an account. You're going to wish you had an account. So it's very important. Doesn't matter how bad the error is, even if it costs you to lose a ton of money, accept it, live to fight another day, review it. That's how you'll grow as a trader. And that's kind of the power of these reviews. It's not often that I get to review red days, or uh, even rarer red days where, I had a mistake. And it's very important that you guys go through the same motions that I do. But anyways, that's my full breakdown of this morning's options trades. And frankly, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay awake for my futures trading. I still haven't slept. So I may need to take a nap here shortly. But does anyone have any questions regarding any of the analysis that went into this morning? Yeah, this falling wedge just completely failed. I guess 730 apparently had like some bad oil news. I don't really know what causes it looked like bad oil news, but we did end up bouncing in decent ways afterwards. Oh, everyone's good? All right, sweet. Well, I will post this recording on YouTube right now and send you guys the link. And yeah, you guys have a great rest of your day if I don't talk to you again. And I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning for hopefully an absolute flawless day, not only psychologically, but execution wise as well. But all right, I'll see you guys later.